afternoon. Oh, I like that microphone. Good afternoon. I'm Andy Linehan, president of the City Club of Portland. Is the volume about right there? Okay. Welcome to our special event today, our Rant. We're trying a number of new things today, including a new venue. Obviously, we've got a few challenges in working with this new venue, so please bear with us as we get the meals out and as we try a new approach to our programs. Today we have Mark Zusman, Colin Cowherd, and Steve Dean. But before we begin our ranting and raving, I have a few items of sober City Club business. Next Friday, January 30th, City Club welcomes Assistant U.S. Attorney Charles Gorder and Stoll Reeves attorney and ACLU activist Charlie Hinkle as they debate the question, is national security a threat to our civil rights? Whether you view the USA Patriot Act as a comfort or a threat, their discussion will be a timely analysis of the appropriate balance of civil liberties and national security. So reserve online or through staff folks from the club here today. Then this coming Monday night, January 26th, City Club book lovers will meet at the Zimmerman Community Center in the Pearl District for the first gathering of the club's new book and discussion group called Citizens Read. Author David Peterson Del Mar will lead a conversation about his book, Oregon's Promise. The club has a few copies available of the book here in the other room that you can purchase today. And whether or not you join us on the 26th, we encourage you to read and share this book, which is an interesting one, and it touches on a number of the themes that we've been dealing with at City Club over the last few months. Art lovers. We have art lovers covered as well. The painting that was on display near registration today as you entered is an example of a quarterly, one example from our quarterly art exhibit at the City Club office. Currently we have hanging at the City Club offices original works by local artists Kristen Broughton, Corey Goldbranson, and Joel Henriquez. We are grateful for the participation of the artists and their representative, Kaplan Art Designs. They've agreed to donate 10% of all sales to benefit City Club. So we invite you to view the other works that are on display at the City Club offices during regular business hours. If you're not yet a member of City Club, now is the perfect time to join. You've heard about the new book group and you know about the Friday forums, but City Club has lots of other activities going on, such as our research board, the issue committees, and our new leaders council. There are many ways you can participate, and we encourage you to get involved. But it starts with becoming a member. The most immediate benefit for becoming a member of City Club now is that you can pre-register for Governor Kulongoski's State of the State speech. That will be occurring at the Multnomah Athletic Club on the 13th, and it's bound to sell out. But if you're a member, you can go ahead and register and get a seat at that event before tickets go on sale to the general public on February 6th. You can join the club by speaking to a staff member today, or you can do that online. I wanted to especially welcome the Lincoln High School Constitution team, which is here with us at the table near the front, and I also want to thank their sponsor, Stoll Reeves. It's great that we have two local Constitution teams which have done such a great job at the state Constitution competitions that they've come in finalists. So congratulations and welcome to the club. Broadcast of City Club programs this quarter is made possible in part by corporate underwriting from Pacific Corps, CH2M Hill, and Schwabe, Williamson, and Wyatt. We are very grateful for their support. City Club prides itself on dispassionate, research-based analysis of public affairs issue, but sometimes you've just got to vent. Judging from the good size of our audience today, there's a lot of ranting lying below the calm and polite demeanor of our City Club audience members. Now, I know one of the things you could and probably do rant about are lengthy and boring introductions to City Club presentations by City Club stuffed shirts when you really want to hear the guest speakers. So I'm going to keep this short and just give you a little bit of biographical information about our speakers. Mark Zusman is the editor of Willamette Week. He received an undergraduate degree in literature from Hobart College in Geneva, New York, and a master's degree in journalism from the U of O. After work as a reporter for the Finger Lake Times and with columnist Jack Anderson, he was hired as business editor of Willamette Week. Then in 1983, along with Richard Meeker, he incorporated the City of Roses newspaper company and purchased Willamette Week. Zusman has freelanced for a number of publications and was for 2 years the regional correspondent for Business Week magazine. He's won a number of regional and national journalism awards, including the Gerald Loeb Award for Distinguished Business and Financial Journalism, awarded by the UCLA Graduate School of Management, as well as the Bruce Baer Award for Public Affairs Reporting. Our second speaker, Colin Cowherd, can be seen weeknights anchoring sports for KGW Northwest News-Channel, News-Channel 8 at 6, 6:30, and 11. He also hosts Sports Sunday, which airs Sunday evenings at 11 p.m. He has his own sports radio program on KFXX-AM in Portland. He came to News Channel 8 in 1996 from WTVT TV, a Fox affiliate in Tampa, Florida, where he was sports anchor. Before that, Cowherd was sports director at KVBC TV, an NBC affiliate in Las Vegas, Nevada. He began his broadcast career as a play-by-play announcer for the AAA Las Vegas Stars of the Pacific Coast League. He's earned a number of awards, including Nevada's Sportscaster of the Year award for 5 years, and he won a local Emmy for the sports show Bucks Sunday in Tampa. Cowherd received a BA degree in radio and television from Eastern Washington University. Now, before I read Steve Dean's introductory information, I just got to say that I read what they give me, so here goes. Steve Dean writes the Metro column for the Oregonian, a post he has held since 1994. The column occasionally wins an award. Much more often it warrants the enmity of his readers, who like to remind Dean that he's a failed sports writer. Dean has 3 children, 2 English degrees from Wake Forest, and 1 wife. He has written 2 books, one about comic books and the other about space toys, which embarrass the aforementioned wife no end. He has written for the Oregonian for 24 years and still meets 3 or 4 people each year who want him to apologize for his 1984 column on the late coach Ralph Miller. So welcome our team of ranters, and I'll tell you briefly about our format. After they've ranted on whatever they want to rant about, we'll have a question from our board host, and then we'll look to rants from each of you. And we're going to look for one-word prompts or phrases to stimulate an eruption of ranting and raving from our panel. So welcome our panel.
Can you hear me? I got to tell you, it's a little frightening to see so many of you in the audience that we've written about. It is nevertheless good to be here. I do, however, see a few empty chairs in the room, and it can't be because of the caliber of this panel, so I'm only assuming it's because of the weather. But not to worry, it's my understanding Diane Lynn told City Club officials she'd pay for the lunch of anybody who didn't show up. When Kathleen invited me to come here and rant, I must admit I felt a bit like a Halliburton executive in a room of no-bid contracts, you know, where to begin. But for the last couple of days, I've been at my desk thinking about what to rant about and trying to be a bit serious. And I thought back to what first drew me to this state 25 years ago. That's when, as a fresh-faced college student, I hitchhiked across the United States only to end up in Oregon and decide that I wanted to settle here. And I realized, as I was sitting at my desk, that what drew me here, what drew me to Oregon was what others might call the vision thing. Oregon was a small state that acted large. Oregon was a state that was making national headlines for its bottle bill, its land use planning, and the exploits of a guy named Tom McCall. Portland, too, was a small city that acted big. It was a place that turned the Joni Mitchell lyric on its head. Portland was tearing up the parking lot and putting up paradise. Literally. It was blowing up plans for a highway, putting down light rail tracks, taking down a garage, putting up a public plaza. It had torn up a road along the river and laid down a park. Neighborhood groups were energized, and we even had a basketball team that won a national championship, and did so with an athlete whose idea of rebellion was long hair and Patty Hearst, not Hummers and spliffs. And I don't want to be one of those guys who harkens back to the good old days, but come on. It's hard for us not all to look at ourselves and not feel that we somehow haven't lost our way. We used to be Ken Kesey, now we're something more like Bill Bennett. Nothing may be more telling than the schemes that Portland has been considering as ways to grow and prosper. Now, the proposed development along the south waterfront, I will concede, is imaginative and ambitious, and it does offer some significant risk. But Major League Baseball or a casino, you know, I love baseball, and I've been known to play an occasional hand of Texas Hold'em, but these are about as imaginative as those late-night cable TV ads for nose hair clippers. It would be easy for all of us to sit here and blame our current mayor, who I don't believe is in the audience. And I will tell you that she increasingly acts like she's been inhaling that de-icing stuff down at the Portland airport. But Vera is a decent sort who works hard, cares for their city, and you can't blame her for the departure of Columbia Sportswear. You can't blame her for the wretched deal we cut with Portland Family Entertainment or the more recent giveaway we made to the Portland Armory. Well, actually, you can blame her for all that. But I will come to her defense and tell you that you cannot lay at her feet the blight upon this city, the ugly reality that is the proliferation of white guys with dreadlocks, or that venti decaf low foam soy frappuccino, or the fact that you may have to walk an entire block just to find one. But of course, the reign of Vera is about to end, and 2004 is going to bring us the exciting, energetic, and electrifying mayoral race between Jim Francesconi and Tom Potter. So voters, I want you to slap on your helmets, fasten your electoral seatbelt, because I'm willing to bet that the fireworks, the dynamism, the energy of a Francesconi-Potter race may just rival that of a meeting of the East Multnomah County Soil and Water Conservation District. You know, this week, developer Bob Ball announced that he's not going to run for mayor. So I have to ask, where are the candidates? Where is the next generation of leaders? Does it not sometimes feel as if the political culture of this city has the vigor of Bob Dole without his Viagra? You know, an additional symptom of the malaise that is looming over politics in this city is a fellow who was mayor here 30 years ago. Our infatuation with Neil Goldschmidt, who our newspaper once tagged with the Appalachian Big Dog, the infatuation is understandable. He has had more impact on the landscape of this city than anybody in the last 30 years. And since he's been out of office, his influence has grown more powerful than Damon Stoudemire's stash. It seems as if his office is involved in virtually every public and private deal in this city. Weyerhaeuser's purchase of Willamette, light rail to the airport, and of course the recent purchase of Portland General Electric. I've even heard that he's responsible for Krispy Kreme's arrival to Portland, albeit indirectly. But you know, I get this. I understand it. Neil has more smarts than the entire faculty at Reed. He's got more energy than Tony Robbins on a double espresso, and he's got more charisma than Keiko, God bless his soul. Let's face it, the guy's got more natural ability in his midriff than most of us have in our family tree. But still, this is a problem. And it's not just because his sense of propriety over the decades has become less like Ralph Nader's and more like Tony Soprano's. It's because his outsized influence, his almost mystical pull is a sign of just how constipated civic affairs are in this city. You know, I'm worried that if the guy were to choke on some Pinot Noir, that the wheels of Portland would grind to a halt faster than Randy Leonard blows his fuse. So I don't blame him, nor do I blame our elected officials for exercising a kind of leadership that, with some exceptions, is so timid that it would get them drummed out of a book club, let alone City Hall. So who do I blame? Why has this city become pistol-whipped into a kind of Cleveland of the West? Is it the media? Well, to a degree, yes. You know, with the exception of Steve, who I happen to think, I'm going to embarrass him, is a civic treasure, worthy of a statue or a proclamation or at least a gift certificate at Supercuts. With the exception of Steve, our daily newspaper has become more infatuated with winning national journalism awards than it has been with covering the day-to-day events that really drive this city. This is a paper that has a firm grasp, no, a stranglehold on the obvious. They've won awards for pointing out the challenges for a boy with a disability, and their latest effort is a 94-part series on the fact that life is tough on the reservation. But it is the paper's shameless shilling for a giant subsidy for Major League Baseball that is the most revealing, that most revealingly captures the paper's intellectual indigence. Television, well, it would be too easy for me to attack the crimes, cute pets, and cuter anchors that is the staple of TV news. But even Oregon Public Broadcasting is so lacking in judgment that it canceled Portland's beloved, super popular version of Friends, 7 days. And I may as well get a preemptive strike here. Yes, I do work at a paper that gives City Hall less space than it does she-males. But you know, it's easy to bash the media. It's far more difficult to look at the smaller, less visible ways in which this city seems to have become as unimaginative as the fathers on Mayberry RFD. Evidence? The Portland Business Alliance, whose business development strategy for downtown can best be captured by the phrase, "Bring your fresh ideas downtown, just don't park your ass on our sidewalk." Evidence? The idea that downtown can be saved by bringing ice follies to Pioneer Courthouse Square. And I don't want to be ungracious, but I'd also offer up this very club. You know, 20 years ago, this organization was willing to rattle the cages, to challenge the preconceived notions about this very city. I even remember when this club recommended the legalization of prostitution. Now, say what you will about the wisdom of that decision, but it is a universe away from the thinking that led this group to recommend late last year to leave Portland General Electric exactly the way it is. And since I continue to bite the hand that feeds me, and by the way, thanks for keeping clam chowder off the menu, do you folks realize the signals that you send? Although I understand that it may be changing, but do you realize the signals you send when you hold your meetings at the Multnomah Athletic Club, where electronic sensors reject anybody who doesn't have a platinum card? In small ways, all of these have the effect of slowly turning up the kitchen stove burner and slowly boiling to death the frog of imagination and of creativity that used to be this city's hallmark. How is that for a botched mixed metaphor? Why am I being such a sour puss? Well, two responses. First, wait till you hear these guys. Second, I know what the potential of the city is. It's what drew me here 25 years ago, and I'll bet drew many of you as well. It's the reality behind the Wyden and Kennedy slogan, "We love dreamers." So how do we continue the dream? Well, I don't have the answer, so I'm a journalist. But I've got a couple of examples. What if, for example, we did bring a casino to Portland? But what if we use the revenues not to finance a Major League Baseball stadium, but to finance a world-class public education system? What if, for example, we use some of the billions of dollars in transportation funds that we've raised to build a new bridge over the Willamette, not for cars, but for pedestrians, and we opened it up to artisans on the weekends, sort of like a Ponte Vecchio of Portland? What if we stopped talking about this idea of a farmer's market and actually got it off the ground? And to give credit to Vera, who's had her share of bad ideas, why not take seriously her desire to cover up 405 and create valuable real estate when there's only now car exhaust? And you know what? If all else fails, remember, we've got two of the greatest choices available: legal suicide and medical marijuana. Thank you.
All right, it was kind of daunting listening to, can I unhook this? Where's the engineer here? Do we have, let's see if I can, there we go. There we go. It was kind of daunting to hear the resumes of both Mark and Steve. They made Mark sound like Galileo and Steve the guy who invented air, and I'm just a guy who reads scores and smirks at 11 o'clock. So I feel like I'm a little bit out of my league here, but his message is something I want to talk about. Before we get started, I did think it was ironic that the kids of Lincoln High School are here. And kids, look around the room. Psoriasis, throbbing prostates, this is you in 30 years. Be excited, be very excited. I moved here from Tampa. One of the reasons I did not like Tampa and one of the reasons I enjoyed Portland is because Portland got it. It was a thinking person's city. My wife and I used to laugh that Tampa was so lacking in culture and culinary experience that you could sum up the culinary experience of Tampa in 2 words: Hooters. If you ever got lost, people would say, well, how do I get to Tampa? I would say, fly to Atlanta and just follow the Waffle Houses. It's a great place. So I moved to Portland, not knowing more than that I had cousins who lived here. And my dad always spoke very highly of it and preferred Oregon to Washington, but preferred the business climate of Seattle to Portland. And so that's kind of, you know, the genesis of how I got here. Some of the remarks that Mark said I agree with wholeheartedly. What I wanted to talk about today was big ideas. If I had a complaint about Portland, it would not be the lack of intelligence or the lack of funds. Too often I think we're the guy at the bar who's afraid to ask the pretty girl to dance. We have all the tools but aren't willing to go for it. We talk ourselves out of things. When do thinkers think too much? A prime example of this is many businesses, in fact most I would argue, do not pencil out. I'll never forget during the .com craze, grocer.com. You couldn't find anybody on CNBC who didn't think that was the greatest idea in the world. But they forgot one thing: people like to squeeze fruit, and it bombed. In Los Angeles, the NFL doesn't work, but in Jacksonville, it does. If you want to pencil things out, state parks don't work, nor do hospital. Big ideas come from big risks, whether it be sports, bridges, anything in the infrastructure, or politically. I don't think this state's ever lacked courage, but I have, much like Mark in recent years, flummoxed, for lack of a better word, am often disappointed and discouraged by people willing to step forward and take those chances. I'll give you 2 examples in television where things just shouldn't work and they do. If I would have told you 10 years ago, listen, we're going to create this channel. It's really interesting. We're going to put weather on it, and you'll be able to see cold fronts in Tupelo. It's fascinating. One of the biggest hits on TV. Who would have ever thought you could create a channel for food where the chefs would become celebrities and pastry filled with foie gras got numbers? But it does, and it didn't pencil out. The Golf Channel works. I can't watch 2 holes. There are people that watch it 24/7. I think too often in life, if things don't pencil out, we give up. And if they absolutely pencil out, we go full straight ahead, we charge ahead. But remember, if it pencils out, then everybody else realizes it pencils out. The great ideas come from taking a chance with most things that don't pencil out. In my business, there's a guy named Keith Olbermann, who's a brilliant essayist, sportscaster. But Keith Olbermann gets hired because really smart, well-educated media people are absolutely convinced that everybody's as smart as Keith and him and them. What's interesting is he's never gotten ratings anywhere. He's like a swimming pool. 90% of people use their swimming pool less than 10 days a year. Everybody loves Keith. Nobody watches him. They didn't watch him at Fox. They don't watch him on MSNBC. And the ratings are up 22% at ESPN since he's left. But executives love him. It pencils out. He's Ivy League educated, decent enough looking, very clever. But people don't like wise asses. They want to put their arms around you. Walter Cronkite today couldn't get a job in Medford. Walter Cronkite is the biggest, most influential television personality's not really what he was, television journalist in the history of my life. He didn't pencil out. So again, one of the things we've talked about in this city is, does pro sports have a chance? Could you have a second pro team? Well, let me give you an example. The Portland Trail Blazers, 6 years ago, it didn't pencil out that 18 to 22,000 people a night would pay $90 a ticket, but it was jammed. Now we're a richer city, we're a bigger city, we're a more influential city, and you can't get 8,000 people there because people can't put their arms around it. But yet, if you, and a lot of people may not believe this, did you realize the University of Oregon has more $1,000 boosters to their football program than the University of Washington? They have 2.8 million people. Eugene's got 125,000. If you look at most great college football programs, Wake Forest, unfortunately, is not in that group, nor was your college in New York, but most are rural, most are small, most are surrounded by tiny communities and a lack of income. But people get galvanized. People want to be part of something special. It doesn't necessarily pencil out, but they support it. I think if I had any rant today, it would be that, and I don't mean to sound like Tony Robbins is, I think this is a marvelous city. Too many people, to me, say we can't. This is really a can-do place. This has never lacked. Would Major League Baseball work here? Do we need Major League Baseball? Nobody needs Major League Baseball. Nobody needs hockey. You need bridges. You need hospitals. Would it work here? Oh, absolutely. I lived in Tampa. In Tampa at 5 o'clock, people flee the city. Portland's urban. People like downtown. People like to be part of it. The summer's great. The weather's perfect. You go to Tampa in the summer, it is 98% humidity, 99 degrees. It really shouldn't work and hasn't. Could anything work here? Bigger things work here? Absolutely. But so often when I talk to people about professional sports or sports in this market, they say, well, it's Portland. We're Portland. Remember, the only reason the Mariners are in Seattle and not here is people wanted public transportation here. People wanted baseball there. The Mariners could easily be here. And the difference between Seattle and Portland is simply one pro team. You give the Mariners to Portland, we have 2 pro teams and 2 great universities. They have 2 pro teams and 1 major university. The media, we were talking at the table during lunch here about the Howard Dean situation. My biggest criticism of the media, and I think by and large, most people in it are conscientious. I think there are different sensibilities from radio to TV to print. I would say that most media people make horrible business people because they think that intelligence equals business success. You can give me an 80 IQ and an ambitious guy, and he'll be more successful than 180 IQ and apathetic. Business isn't about intelligence and raw data. Business is about wanting it, about seeking it, about taking gambles. It's so funny when I go around this city and I meet influential people. Neil Goldschmidt used to be my neighbor, but wisely moved. What was interesting, Neil's probably as smart as anybody I've ever met. Again, I'd like to say for the record, I generally interview Rasheed Wallace twice a week. So that said, I don't hang around, you know, a cerebral bunch at all times. But Bill Clinton was brilliant. Bill Clinton entered the White House broke. I don't think anybody thinks George Bush is Galileo. George Bush is worth about $300 million. Again, it all goes back to my focus today is that big ideas and explosive ideas don't pencil out. Sports doesn't pencil out. State parks, hospitals don't pencil out. At some point, you got to take a chance. And I just wish Portland would do that more often.
Get that back in. You got a better microphone. All right. Are there perchance any Republicans in the room? Can I see a show of hands? All right. Well, I'm not talking to many of you then. But those of you who did raise your hands, you've shown some courage. Now show some honesty. Aren't you just a little embarrassed? You know, as a columnist, I desperately try to roam the political center, afflicting the comfortable on both sides of the aisle, exposing hypocrisy regardless of party registration. Since I began covering politics in 1988, either on the op-ed page or in the front of the Metro section, I've gone after the Democrats a fair share of times. I broke the story on the Democratic House scandal in 1989 and helped run the reprehensible David Dix and his sidekick Carl Anders out of Salem. I thought Bill Clinton was an embarrassment and said so. No one in this room thinks less of that great underachiever, Ron Wyden, than I do. No one has anguished more often about Mayor Vera Katz. And no one is more impatient with our current governor and his listless brand of leadership. But all that said, when I compare the two parties at the moment on the scales of power and responsibility, the Democrats' foibles are a whisper, the Republicans a shout. The Democrats may be goofy, spineless, liberal, bleeding hearts. They may be consistently pathetic, but at least they're consistent. The Republicans, you are the political sanctuary for conservative Christians, yet you are bored by the biblical admonition to take care of the least among us. You are outraged by lawlessness, just not the lawbreakers with the white collars. Your idea of the cult that is bankrupting this country literally and metaphorically is not the corporate cheats from Enron, WorldCom, Global Crossing, or Wall Street, but the local teachers union. You are advocates for limited government, yet you celebrate John Ashcroft as he attempts to rein in Oregon's assisted suicide legislation. You are fiscal conservatives gallantly holding the line against Measure 30, yet you yawn as the Bush administration racks up record deficits and its media lapdogs laud a recovery built on consumer debt and trade deficits rather than good old-fashioned job growth. And while you are outraged by government waste, you could care less if the actions of the President and Congress are any indication that corporate tax shelters cost the government somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 billion a year, which forces each household in America to assume another $500 of the tax burden. With great power comes great responsibility. Do you remember who said that? Winston Churchill? Ronald Reagan? No, it was good old Stan Lee, one of the creators of Marvel Comics, who slipped that line to Spider-Man way back in the 60s, and doggone if it isn't true today. The last time I checked, the Republicans had the power. They control the White House, they control Congress, largely due to the sullen ineptitude of the Democrats. They control talk radio and the public square. Where in God's name is the responsibility? What have the Republicans done with their glorious advantage? What do they celebrate beyond the beatification of self-interest. Assume for a moment that the common charges of conservatives are accurate. Government is still marbled with fat. Schools are overfunded production lines of mediocrity where the average student can't tell you the difference between the fifth commandment and the sixth. Public employees are ruining this country, and illegal immigrants are stealing our jobs, at least the jobs at Tufil's Nursery and down at the Taco Bell. You want to believe that, ladies and gentlemen of the grand old party? We'll give those to you. But tell me this, why are those red meat issues more outrageous to you than the fact that between 1970 and the year 2000, growth for the bottom 99% of Americans, growth in income was a grand total of $2,700 over 30 years, while the increase for the top 100th of 1% over the same 30-year period was more than $20 million. Trickle-down economics, anyone? Why are you more outraged by teachers' health care benefits than the fact that the average married couple working 2 jobs forks over every 8th dollar in Social Security taxes, while the CEO with the $1 million salary only has to pay every 93rd dollar? Why are so many Republicans up in arms about the sanctity of marriage? Just not Ronald Reagan's or Newt Gingrich's or Bob Dole's. And so few complaining that the IRS audited 400,000 of the working poor who applied for the Earned Income Tax Credit in the year 2001, 8 times as many audits as it conducted of people making over $100,000. Oh, I know. Republicans make over $100,000. Or do they? Is it only those pathetic liberals who are pert when our tax system squeezes the middle class and the upper middle class in order to subsidize the super rich yahoos who make all of the political contributions? The average annual pay increase for the average, the annual average pay increase for the average American between 1970 and 2000 was a nickel an hour. Do you think only Democrats were hurt by that? It's a neat political gambit, I'll grant you that. The Republicans hooked the ranchers and the wheat farmers and the small-town businessmen on the inflammatory social issues, gay rights, abortion, and the relentless rhetoric that government is failing them, then abandons them to preserve a system constructed, I might add, by the Democrats, constructed jointly by the Democrats, that caters to most of the greediest bastards on the planet. With great power comes great responsibility. With the abdication of that responsibility comes those great heroes of the Oregon Republican Party: Minnis, Miller, Mabon, Mannix. In the absence of same, we have the 3 Republicans on the Rules Committee in Salem, Roger Byer, Jason Atkinson, and Bill Fisher, denouncing Neil Goldschmidt at length for having the unmitigated gall since he left public office of making tons of money, putting his interests before those of the state, and otherwise acting like a Republican. And we have one election after another where the voters of Oregon really have no options. A Republican has not won a partisan statewide election in Oregon since 1988. Only one, the memorable Tony Meeker, has gained office via election in the last 22 years. And so it is, when all Oregonians, liberals and conservatives alike, look for leadership, we are chained at the belt and ankle to the likes of Ron Wyden, Vera Katz, and Ted Kulingoski. Thank you.
You know, Steve said something about Ronald Reagan. You know why Ronald Reagan was brilliant? He ran on the family values platform, and he never got along with any of his kids. How did he do that? You notice that? He's brilliant.
Consistency.
I can see we've got a little anger and a little pent-up raving here. So we're going to have our first question from Heather Kmetz, who's on our board and leads the New Leaders Council. But after that, each of you can raise a phrase or a word. No political diatribes, just a word or a phrase. And then these guys will riff on your rant. So we'll start with Heather Kmetz.
So in keeping to the format, Oregon, we heart dreamers.
I missed it too.
What'd you say? The Wyden and Kennedy slogan, Oregon, we love dreamers.
We love dreamers.
Well, I'm just going to repeat myself. You know, what Heather said is Oregon, we heart dreamers, and I assume you want us to rant about that. I will tell you that it's stunning to me that this state has what is arguably the most creative advertising agency in the country, if not the world, in Wyden and Kennedy. And it's also got what has been the most successful, arguably the most successful marketing company of the past 25 years. Nike's not, I mean, I know a number of people in this room think of Nike as a company that makes shoes with kids who make $3 a day in the Philippines, but what it really is it's a huge marketing success. How can a state that has that kind of talent been so unable to market itself, forget to the rest of the state, but to market itself to us? Think of how we think of ourselves. And we love dreamers, I think, is a wonderful slogan to make fun of. I think if we can put some substance behind it, I don't have a problem with it.
Raymond Mandel, City Club member. My wife and I moved to Portland about 11 years ago.
One word.
One word? Vera Katz, has she done anything right?
I was going to say to Erwin, nice leather.
Not lately. I'm sorry, I knew Vera when she was Speaker of the House. And as Speaker of the House, Vera was a marvelous manager of people and issues. Wasn't particularly ego-ridden, didn't care who got the credit. It has been disheartening to watch what she's done as mayor, as she has, as I think Mark talked about, she's been distracted, she's been misdirected, and she has scaled down, I think, the city's ambition.
I'd simply add this, and you know, it is so hard to be in public service, and at a certain point, you know, everybody's going to have flaws, and the media's going to jump on it. If I had to criticize Vera for one thing, and only one thing, it would be a management style that is so sort of keep the power within my lap, and such an unwillingness to share and empower the rest of the city with decisions that it has added to what I called earlier sort of a constipation in civic affairs that makes me that makes me wonder about what happens next. And to some degree, I'd argue she's part of the problem and part of the reason why we have a mayoral race that I think a lot of people in the city are frankly quite uninspired by, despite the Tom Potter buttons I've seen on the lapels of many in this room.
I would say, is there any mayor in a city of 1 million or more in America that we could deem popular? Bill Clinton at one point had 64% of, I think at a high nationally, 64 to 65% of the public's approval when the economy was good. And if you'd have just listened to talk radio, you'd have thought he was Lucifer. It is really hard in today's financial landscape to be in a public office. And the higher the office and the more responsibility you bear, I find the criticism is angrier and probably for people like Vera more difficult to take. I just don't know any popular public figures in large cities. They don't like the guy in Los Angeles, clearly, and I think Bloomberg now they're bordering on bankruptcy in New York. I don't know where there's a popular mayor in America, in a big city. Everybody likes the guy in Omaha, you know.
Ray Polani, a City Club member. Mark said, what if? Well, what if light rail, instead of delivering about 6,000 people per hour to downtown, were to deliver 40,000 people per hour downtown?
One word, Ray.
It could be done with a subway. And Colin said, pencil it. Well, it could be penciled if the Oregonians were to free their constitution from their restriction to do just highways. How about it?
Here's my response. I have no idea about a subway, but what I will tell you is in response to the critics of light rail, and there have been those since day one, what those people don't understand is that there's a critical mass that you get to, and I think most of the people in this room understand. Every spur that you add increases the success of the system. Light rail doesn't work when we simply have light rail out to Hillsborough or light rail out to the east side. It works when we have spurs all over the city. And once interstate hooks up and then we move on to the next one, that's when it begins to make work. And people who are unwilling to recognize that this is a long-term investment that will have huge payouts and criticize it because it fails to meet the ridership numbers for year one or for year two, frankly, I think are short-sighted.
If you don't think public transportation is important, drive up to Seattle some afternoon.
Chris Alman, City Club member, the initiative process.
You have nothing to say. My guess is I'm more a fan of the initiative process than everybody in this room. I do think that we have got to try to remove the money from the system and legislate those people who get paid bounties for gathering signatures. But I will also tell you that in a world in which voters constantly feel like they're being given an option to vote for Tweedledee or Tweedledum, the ability to have discussions in this state about assisted suicide and the variety of things that this state, when it puts social issues on the ballot, I frankly find energizing, whether they end up going the way I like or dislike. I'm very well aware of the criticisms, and I'm very well aware of the paralyzing effect they have on the legislature. But in terms of raising the bar and getting this state and people who don't come to these meetings engaged in discussion, I end up being a bigger fan of it than probably the City Club position.
Chris Smith, City Club member. Lars Larson.
I think Steve was ready for this one.
I can do that, yeah. I prepared for that one, let me be honest. Lars is perfectly, I believe, conscribed by two H.L. Mencken quotes. The first is the definition of a demagogue, who is someone who preaches a doctrine he knows to be untrue to men he knows to be idiots. And the second is probably my favorite H.L. Mencken quote: "It is a sin to think evil of a man, but it is seldom a mistake."
Let me offer the following thoughts about Lars. To understand the guy, and I actually know him pretty well, first of all, you need to understand how much he loves what he does. He is as happy in his job as a Catholic priest in a Toys R Us. Oh, is that in poor taste? I'm sorry.
Mark's prepared too.
The other thing to realize is, you know, frankly, a lot of his listeners are people who are easily distracted by shiny objects. And lastly, I would point out, I happen to think that when Lars was in TV, he was the best television journalist this city has had ever since I got here. That the guy is actually an amazing reporter. And what you need to understand about Lars is he only believes about 60% of what he says. He understands that in order to succeed on talk radio, you have got to be an ideologically riven individual, and in talk radio tends to be on the right. He doesn't believe a lot of it. Now, that doesn't make anybody in this room feel any better about it. It may make you feel worse, but I think it's worth knowing.
You asked about Howard Stern. What was the question? I don't really compete against him in radio. I think conservative talk radio is a canvas for the terminally cranky, and I would argue with anybody at length that listening to it for more than 5 minutes does anything more than make you angry. My theory on life is there's a reason Rush Limbaugh has bad ears, back pain, and is physically a train wreck. You're that angry every day, it takes its toll. By the way, I'm 40 and feel 28 and a screaming liberal on the air. So liberals are, Al Franken to me has a full head of hair and looks, really happy. All the Republicans have bad backs, bad ears, and are overweight. So be liberal and be happy is my theory on radio. Not the most sophisticated take next to Galileo here, but that was what I had.
Mike Burton, actually Chris took my question. I'll give you a different one. Portland Police Bureau.
Come on, Mike. By and large, obviously, great group of guys doing God's work. We wouldn't want to walk a mile in their shoes, protecting us from God knows what out there. And you know what? That's 90% true. But it is, unfortunately, a closed fraternity. What the Oregonian has to go through to get a public record out of the Portland Police Bureau is embarrassing. We're still trying to get Kendra James records from them. They are refuse to accept criticism. They are a self-righteous lot that doesn't understand that if they admitted their humanity occasionally and their occasional tendency to make a mistake, we would celebrate them much more than we currently do.
I simply find it amusing that I can say things that they can't, given their new censorship policy. Yes.
Bill Savage, City Club member, Portland Trailblazers.
Guess I can go first on that one. The initiatives question, I was going to let you guys take it. A team that has forgot the basic principles of business, which is customer service.
Jim Wittenberg, now that I'm 64 on the Social Security, I can finally afford to become a member of the City Club. I'm really happy to be here. I wish the one word would be property tax limitation. Since 1976, it's been going on here. So.
Well, here, at the risk of continuing to challenge your preconceived notions, ballot measure 5 wasn't the problem. Oh, that's okay, you can boo. What did ballot measure 5 do? Ballot measure 5 equalized school funding. You know, in Portland, we had plenty of money. In Estacada, they were closing down schools in March because people were asked, raise our property taxes in Estacada or we're going to close schools. And in Estacada, for whatever reason, people said no. Now, you could argue sitting here, well, we don't care about Estacadans. The benefit of ballot measure 5 is it said, no, we're either all going to rise or we're all going to suffer together. It was the legislature that chose to have us suffer together.
And I would disagree just a bit. Measure 5 did shift the balance, the majority of tax payments from business over to residential. It was a dramatic shift in there. And it also opened the way, and again, Mark may be right, this may be the legislature, but we are now operating under, if you want to run a decent school district, you need a decent local option. In communities like I live in Lake Oswego, we can afford a local option. We can afford to put out a pretty good school district. And in other communities, Estacada, I suppose, Umatilla, Hermiston, whatever, who can't afford a local option, they're up the creek.
Craig Hill. I'm a guest and Lincoln High School Constitution team member. And you touched on Measure 30 for a few minutes. I thought Measure 30 would be mine.
Measure 30, Measure 30, yes. And I trust and hope that every school district in the state has prepared for Measure 30 to fail, because I unfortunately think that it will, despite the endorsement of Steve's paper and mine.
Chris Krause, City Club. My word is PDC.
The Portland Development Commission. Wow. We wrote a story a couple of weeks ago, Nigel Jaquist, who's in this room, about the giveaway that the Portland Development Commission made to the Portland Armory that is a complete repeat, as far as we can tell, of what happened with Portland Family Entertainment. And it makes you wonder about the lack of sharp pencils in this city and at Vera Katz in terms of creating these pie-in-the-sky deals, talking about returns that the city will never see, and then you have in that agency an agency that, at least our experience has been, is harder to get information out of than the Portland Police Bureau.
Ernie Bonner, City Club member. Media power. Too much.
Agreed.
I don't have nearly as much as I need.
Ted Kay, City Club member. Sales tax.
Look, 90% of the problem in this state would be solved if, and I'm not here endorsing Howard Dean. What did Howard Dean do in Vermont? He basically created a rainy day fund. He got rid of the kicker, said that money will go to a rainy day fund and we only get to spend it when we're in a recession. Vermont had a recession almost as bad as Oregon's. Their state bounced out of it because they had funds to rely on. I'd argue it's going to be a lot easier getting that taken care of in this state than to convince Oregonians that we need a sales tax, and it would take care of literally 80 to 90% of our problems if we could have the discipline to take that away, which unfortunately would require a constitutional change, put that money in a bank account and only spend it when times get tough. I think a sales tax is still an unsellable proposition in Oregon.
By the way, I'm amazed by that. I've lived in 5 states. I'm amazed that Portland and the state of Oregon can survive with 0 sales tax and 9% personal income. If you wonder why Boise has 3 times as many Fortune 500 companies, Exhibit A. If you're going to bring executives to a city and they make 90 and immediately they make 82 just based on personal income tax. One of the things that drives me nuts is that, because I've lived in so many states and felt it so many different ways, is that there's so much misinformation about the sales tax. If you make a decent, now, and a lot of people don't, but you have to spend with a 5% sales tax so much, because you remember many things are eliminated, pharmaceuticals, some groceries, some basic staples of life. You have to spend so much money in sales tax or in big picture items to spend $3,000 a year in sales tax. But yet, if you make a decent living and are creating wealth and jobs for other Oregonians, you have no say at all. People say you can write it off. It's still out of pocket. And if you go into a recession, it's a bar stool with missing a leg. It's so basic to me. How can you have a state which always is first into a recession and last out of it, where the minute you lose jobs and wealth, you lose massive income to the state coffers? You know, the sales tax, you still got to go buy eggs. But if a $100,000 guy walks out of the state, boom, you lose everything. I mean, to me, it's mind-boggling. There's not a politician or somebody with the courage to say what Ross Perot did. People make fun of Ross Perot and his little charts. Remember Tim Russert, Florida, Florida, Florida? You know, when it comes to taxes, keep it simple. And simply speaking, you got to have a sales tax. It makes no sense not to have it.
Wow, we got a little good rant going there at that one. We've got time for one more rant. Justin, why don't you do it and make it a good one?
Justin Gottlieb, City Club member. John Ashcroft.
Go, Steve.
That was a sigh, by the way.
You know, I'm sorry. What I try to do with my column is to kind of flow to the vacuum, to kind of do what other people aren't saying. And I mean, obviously Ashcroft is a lightning rod for a whole lot of stuff. He's, I guess he scares me. I mean, I think the stuff, but I mean, he's part of he's part of the administration that scares me. I mean, I think most of the evil impulses in this empire are being directed through John Ashcroft, and yeah, I wish he'd stay the heck out of Oregon and allow us to make the decisions that we've made by a vote of the people.
Here, here. Thank you.
You done?
Thank you to our panel for letting us put you on the spot so completely for the last half hour. The City Club is adjourned.